Hi, welcome to Unreliable Narrator Episode 5, the 007 edition. Ryan and I were really happy to get a chance to interview Dave Holcomb, author of His World Never Dies, The Evolution of James Bond. This book came out a little while earlier this year. The first time we interviewed Dave, the file got corrupted and we lost the entire episode. But Dave was gracious enough to grant us a second interview, so here we go.
Unreliable Narrator with Tim Ebel and Ryan Hansen, the cab drivers of creativity, champions of the unknown, believably unbelievable. Film, TV, books, cosplay, and society issues. Interviews of creators, authors, and artists. Mayhem on the word-cutting floor. And now, join us to find out what's really going on.
Welcome to the Unreliable Narrator podcast. I'm Ryan. This is
Tim.
And we have a guest with us whose name is Dave. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Oh, anytime. We are going to be talking about Dave's book on this podcast. He wrote a book about James Bond. And maybe you just want to give us a little preamble about your book, Dave.
Sure. It's called His World Never Dies, The Evolution of James Bond. It's available on Amazon.com, Kindle Unlimited as well, if you're on that on Amazon. It's an analysis of the James Bond film series. I looked at how the film series has been able to adapt and survive to stay current and relevant well into the 21st century now. So, the series has been around for almost 60 years. It's gone through a lot of transformations and changes, and I just thought it would be cool to take a look at those changes and kind of analyze why they happened and answer the ultimate question of why we still care about James Bond.
Okay. So this is not our first try at this podcast. We'll just warn everyone. So if you have deja vu, there's a reason for it.
I have deja vu right now.
I'm sure everybody does. So we'll just kind of, we'll go over some of the things. I guess, Tim, you have a couple questions about the book first.
Sure. One thing we never got into last time was the Remington Steele connection. I was thinking about that afterwards. Pierce Brosnan originally appeared, or well, maybe not originally, but one of the projects he worked on was the Remington Steele show. Did you ever watch that show, Dave? And how do you think that influenced his later character?
Honestly, I never watched that show. That is the show that Brosnan did in the 80s, correct? And it was the show he was tied up in. And the reason why he couldn't do Bond earlier in his career. Am I right on that?
I think so. He was a detective with a bit of a checkered past. I didn't watch the show steady myself. The only reason I really knew about it at all is because a couple of the girls that I was dating were real fans, let's say.
Okay. I guess I'll have to check out that show. I'm maybe find it on Netflix or something. But yeah, I've never watched it.
It's a cute show. I guess after we did the first go with this podcast and then failed to have a recording of it, I checked a couple things out again, and one of them was the connection between James Bond and the $6 Million Man, which it's funny because they fed each other back and forth. It turns out. The $6 Million Man came out after James Bond, and then a couple things happened on that show, which then appeared in Moonraker second. But
Okay.
I also noticed that the first appearance of a laser ever in a movie was in a James Bond movie, and I can't remember which one that was now.
I believe that would be Goldfinger.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the one finally tuned to his manhood.
Yes. Very famous scene. We get the famous line, "Do you expect me to talk?" And then Goldfinger answers, "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die." Very famous exchange there.
Yeah, that's iconic.
Yeah, absolutely.
It kind of scenes like that. They work their way all up into um, The Spy Who Shagged Me, even movies like that. Seems like it. It just they seem to move forward through time.
I always found that really cool. Being a movie fan as a young kid, I always liked going back, watching old movies, and knowing that you're going to see a real famous scene in this movie. And sometimes I would watch a movie just for one scene or just one line. AFI had that list. I think it came out in 2005. I was in eighth grade, and it was the top 100 movie quotes of all time. James Bond has, I think, two of the quotes of the top 100. I went through movies on that list just watching the movies for the quotes. And in some cases, the movies were average at best, but it had a very memorable one line or one scene. And it was just so cool to watch that iconic scene, because like you're waiting for it to come for 2 hours or however long. And then you come to it. And then what's fun about it is then you get all the cultural references like you're talking about when you watch The Spy Who Shagged Me or some other spoof on TV or something. You get the joke. You're now an insider. I always found that very cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Changes over time then. Maybe you could talk a bit about how the Bond characters progressed over the years.
The Bond character himself or the series?
I guess, well, it's kind of both of them together, right?
Yes. I would say, and I think I say this in my book, I do say in my book that Bond, the person, the character, he has changed, but I think he still is somewhat of a misogynist. But we know the series and the fans, I would say, no longer view Bond as the perfect man, the perfect example of masculinity. There are flaws in masculinity in the 21st century, and we get a flawed version of masculinity with James Bond now in Daniel Craig. And I think that's the biggest change with the character and probably the series overall. The series also has been more accepting of women in putting women in more powerful roles, making M a woman in 1995 with Judi Dench was a big deal. Progressively, the other women have gotten more powerful roles. There have been more betrayals of women in the last 20 years, kind of showcasing that women are not just weak and weak beings that are supposed to be ordered around by Bond and other men. They have minds of their own, and they can also be conniving and villainous and think for themselves. That has been a very progressive part of the series, along with an inclusion of more races, more diversity with certain characters. But the first thing I brought up with the changes of less misogyny and this idea of the series now conveying the idea that Bond isn't perfect and what he does, it shouldn't be emulated all the time in everyday life. We still love him. He's still a hero, but he's more of an anti-hero now. And that was a big part of my book at the beginning, especially in chapter 2, kind of comparing Bond to the Batman series when it was relaunched with Christopher Nolan as the director last decade. Same kind of idea. Batman, still a hero, still someone to root for, but no longer perfect and somewhat of an anti-hero, especially when he takes blame for the acts that Harvey Dent actually does at the end of The Dark Knight.
Okay. That's a really interesting comparison between the two. I never really thought about that with Batman.
Yeah, that is a fairly interesting comparison. I think James Bond shares a lot of things in common with Batman in particular. I mean, besides the generalities, the physicality of the character, the highly trained martial arts and stuff like that, Batman's always got kind of they have a long history. Batman's slightly longer than James Bond, but very storied nonetheless. And the stories have both evolved over the years to kind of fit the times that we live in. The subject matter and I guess the characters. I think that's an apt comparison, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. I glad I thought of it. I thought to make that comparison in my book because Batman's not really viewed as an action hero. He's a superhero, but I think Bond shares more similarities with Batman than any other character, perhaps in film history. The things you mentioned with the changes those series have undergone, they've both been around for a very long time. They both have very cool cars. They're both orphans. There's a lot of similarities. At least in the older Batman movies, you get a different woman in each movie, just like you have the Bond girls. So yeah, there's quite a few similarities when you stop and think about Batman versus James Bond.
We talked before. I guess it would be another question that I like to ask you, and I thought it was a good answer that you gave. So maybe you want to edit this out or whatever, Tim. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of the questions that I asked before, and there was one that I asked that you gave a really good answer to, Dave, and that was your reasons for writing the book, like how you came up with it and the reasons why you thought it was important to write.
I got the idea for the book when I guess it was last summer. Well, really last December. Last summer, I introduced my fiance to her first Bond movie. She had never seen the series before. We watched GoldenEye, and I tried to show her one that I thought she would like to try and get her to really like the series. And then in December, we watched Goldfinger. That's my favorite Bond movie. And then at that point, I was starting to kind of geek out and really try to teach her, the different actors that have played James Bond, the differences between each era. And that was at that point where I was enjoying teaching her, where I thought, hey, I could turn this into a book or something along those lines, try to turn it into a book. And that's when I started exploring the idea of writing my first book, the self-publishing aspect of it. And it kind of just took off from there. Really enjoyed writing it. I wrote it pretty quickly. I love James Bond, and ultimately I wanted to share kind of my passion for the series with the rest of the world.
All right. And researching the franchise, was there anything really that you came up with that really surprised you? I mean, we know you've watched the films a lot and you're a big fan, but is there anything that you came across when you were doing any research for the book that really caught you off guard?
I wouldn't say so. I think maybe some of the I found a comment. I mean, it was perfect for the argument I was trying to make, actually. But I was researching, kind of just coming up with theories as to why we are so enthralled with this character, right? Because at this point, you could argue that James Bond's kind of a jerk, that he's kind of a misogynist, as I've said. He's not particularly friendly. He's not a great person. So what draws us to him, even in the 21st century? And I guess some people aren't drawn to him anymore, but I think a lot of people still are. And why we continue to see these movies. And I think one thing that surprised me was Ian Fleming had a quote that he kind of designed the character from the start to not be very well liked, and to kind of be not have any virtues. I'm paraphrasing the line in I think it's in chapter 2, where he says that Bond doesn't really have any virtues other than queen and country, and Fleming said those probably aren't even virtues anyway. So I think that's part of why we love him, because he puts the world ahead of himself and really everyone around him, and it comes across as kind of being a jerk or selfish, but actually he's very selfless in the sense of he will not sacrifice a friend or a woman or himself for the good of mankind. And I think that is part of why we love him so much. And to answer your question, I was a little bit surprised that was really the design from the beginning. I know the books are different than the films, but that was Ian Fleming's original objective, is to have this character not really be a hero per se.
Yeah, I think you really hit on something interesting there. That's one of the things that really stands out about the characters. You have some of the characters that are kind of like your virtuous, I guess, your everyman, and that's going to bring the audience into the story where you can kind of put yourself in their shoes a little more. And James Bond, I think it's a little bit more difficult for that. He's got all the cars, he's got all the toys, and he does all the cool stuff that everyone likes, but we can't really do that. We can't really put ourselves in his shoes. And in order to do it, he is a bit of a jerk. I think you're right there.
It's more of a fantasy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the part of what attracts us to it is we know it's not real life, and maybe we know even more now that unlike maybe in the 60s and 70s, this is not real, and no one would really act this way, but it's kind of cool to think about possibly being this person.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head with that. Tim, do you have
a lot of really, if you look at some of the most popular characters of all time, a lot of them are dark, though. They're not. Well, like let's look at Darth Vader, for instance. He's, one of the most, I guess you could say, iconic characters ever, and he has very little redeeming about him. There's more examples in recent times would be Negan on The Walking Dead. Everybody really loves that character. They love to hate him.
Yeah.
There is something about the jerk character. And I know the two I picked are mass murderers, but yeah. But other than the mass murder character, there is something that people really enjoy about a character that isn't your typical nice guy.
Yeah.
Maybe
right.
We all, or a lot of us, want to be that way. Like we feel like that's freeing, that kind of behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right.
Your writing process. I mean, when you set out to write this book, how long did it take you?
About 5 weeks.
Oh wow, that's very quick. And for research, your writing process is mostly you bash some stuff out every night. You're a busy guy. How do you find the time?
I think the key to finding the time is coming up, if you want to write a book, come up with a topic that you really love, because then it'll come naturally. I wanted to write this book very badly because I enjoyed the subject matter and I wanted to get through it. I set goals. I had a spreadsheet and set a certain amount of words I wanted to get every week. And then I kind of divided up, how many I needed to get each day to hit that goal per week. And then how many weeks it was going to take me to hit my goal of 30,000 words and change. But I routinely found myself writing more than what my goal was because it was a subject that I really enjoyed writing about. So and I love writing too. So writing kind of comes secondhand to me. I am a freelance writer for my day job. So doing this at nights or in the afternoon when I had some spare time, was just kind of second nature.
So most of your other writing is in sports, correct? You're a sports journalist?
Yes, a lot of it is football, NFL, but some college football and some baseball and a little bit of hockey still.
So this is probably a refreshing change for you. But I bet I'm imagining that you would have had lots of times where you'd be writing on this book and you would run into research you'd need to do. So that would kind of halt that writing line and you'd have to stop, find out some specific facts. Your book would have quite a bit of research, I imagine.
Yeah, it was quite a bit of research, and I kind of did it the way you just described. I would write until I came to a point where I wanted to put in a fact that I didn't know, or I wanted something to back up my information. So I looked it up. It's not really much different than what I do with sports writing. It's on a much smaller scale because articles are 500 to 1,000 words. So it's like a third of a chapter, but it's same idea. You write. I would write a sports article, and when I come to a point where I want to put in a quote or I want to put in something that another opinion from somewhere else, I would stop and do that research and then plug that information in and then keep going. For the most part, that's what I would do. Occasionally, you're in writing mode and maybe you just skip ahead. But for a lot of it, that's what I did.
So I got to ask now, favorite James Bond, like what's your ranking?
I love Sean Connery. I think, I'm kind of an original type guy, so it's hard to beat the original. Pierce Brosnan was the James Bond that I was introduced to when I was a kid. So I think Brosnan, when you think of Bond, that's who you think of, is how Brosnan looks in the tuxedo. So I think those are 1A and 1B for me. Daniel Craig has really grown on me. I don't know. I haven't really ranked the rest of them, to be honest. I don't think any of them are bad. They all have their redeeming qualities. They're all different. And looking back at it after writing this book, I'm glad they made them all different because it gives each one of them their own place in Bond history. Timothy Dalton's movies weren't very good, but I think he played the role in a very modern way, especially for the late 1980s. It's both of his films are very forward thinking with some of the things they were doing at that time. Unfortunately, the plots just weren't very good. I thought he was fine, more than fine as the character. And Roger Moore isn't one of my favorites, but he has some very iconic, funny lines, and some of his movies, like The Spy Who Loved Me, I really love. For Your Eyes Only, I think might be the most underrated Bond movie. Live and Let Die, although I don't think it stands up as much with the race issue in that movie. It's still enjoyable from a certain point of view. And so I think they all have their redeeming qualities, but my favorite would be Sean Connery and Pierce Brosnan.
All right, and a particular movie you mentioned Goldfinger was your favorite. Is there one? Everyone has one where it's just like, for me, it's the Timothy Dalton one, License to Kill. The thoughts of sitting through that, I don't know if I could do it. Is there one of those for you?
I'll sit through any of them. I love watching them all, but my least favorite, the one I think is the worst, is Moonraker. And it's funny because Moonraker is fine for like an hour and a half, but then once he goes up into space, it's just, James Bond shouldn't go into space. So at that point, they kind of lost me, and I mentioned this in my book that Moonraker was made because of the popularity of Star Wars, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, that happens all the time in Hollywood reacting to what's popular at the time. And if you watch The Spy Who Loved Me, at the end of the credits of every Bond movie, at least the earlier ones, it says Bond will be back in and says the title of the next movie. They don't do that anymore. But at that time, it said For Your Eyes Only. And they actually snuck in Moonraker in between Spy Who Loved Me and For Your Eyes Only because of the popularity of Star Wars. And again, Moonraker is fine for an hour and a half, and then he goes into space, and there's the romance scene with Jaws. It was just a little bit, it was too cheesy. I know Bond is very cheesy at times, but that was too cheesy for me, and the whole space scene was just too unrealistic.
That the Jaws love story might be my second favorite, next to the two people that were in that documentary about the flat Earth people. I don't know if you've seen that. We just talked about it last week, but if you haven't seen it, it's a great almost romance story. Anyway, we won't get into that. That's a rabbit hole we won't go down.
But let's go sideways totally now. So what about Zardoz?
Oh, come on, Tim.
Connery movie.
No, you didn't. You didn't. No, I feel bad for Dave right now because you might not know what that is, and he's going to have to go look
What
that
is
up.
it? I guess I don't know.
It's a Sean Connery movie.
Okay.
From 1974 called Zardoz. And all you need to do is see the one picture, and it tells the whole story.
It's going to be the weirdest thing you're going to look up in your life. I'm going to guarantee it. And it might ruin Sean Connery. I don't know if you should even do it, Dave.
Maybe you shouldn't look.
Oh, okay. I've seen this photo. I didn't know what it was from. Okay. I know what we're talking about.
Oh, geez. So when we're coming up to with the new Bond movies, what do you see for the future? Like, where do you think they're going to go with the characters, with the storylines, just anything? And any thoughts about where they're going for the future of Bond?
I think they're going to continue to progress the way they have. When they announced the cast for Eclipse, they didn't have. No Time to Die. It was rumored that it was going to be named Eclipse, but then that was not the title of James Bond 25. It's No Time to Die. When they announced the cast, it's the most diverse cast in Bond history. And let me bring up the cast here for a second. Sorry. They're bringing in. Excuse me if I pronounce any of these names wrong, but Rami Malek, who was really great in Bohemian Rhapsody. I believe he won an Oscar for that movie as the primary villain. And you have Naomi Harris back as Moneypenny, and you have Anna de Armas as another woman in the film, along with Lashana Lynch, who was in when Captain Marvel came out a couple months ago, black woman. So you have different races, 3 different potential lead women in, and that's not even counting Moneypenny, who's also a non-white actress. So very, very diverse cast, more powerful women I see in the future. I mentioned this in our original airing of original podcast, that I think they could take a page out of the Marvel universe and maybe they do a spin-off of some sort. There's a lot of talk about could James Bond ever be a woman? I'm not a huge fan of that idea. I think Bond should remain as close to the character as possible. If you want to make him a different race, a race of people that do live in London in the 21st century, and you want to be, more accepting, more inclusive of different people, and you want to make him a black character or even Asian, something like that, I'm not against that. But I am kind of against him being a woman, just because that really goes against the original character. But that doesn't mean you can't have a different series or a spin-off where a James Bond-like character is a female, and maybe Bond. I don't know how it would work with Bond showing up in her movie, because he might overshadow her. But you could have her pop in and out of one of his movies, and she could be 006, 009, whatever, another secret agent, and you could turn it into a TV show, or you could turn it into a movie. Maybe the TV show is the answer, because you guys kind of rebutted my these thoughts last week by saying, well, what if the spinoff is better than the original? And that's actually a good point. Maybe you make it a different medium then. Make it a TV show and make the female James Bond lead of the show. But anyway, I don't know if that is in the immediate future or if that's anything even they're considering. But things like this are where I see the series going, perhaps making Bond a different race and including as many different races and more powerful women where possible in the series.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. And, I think it's one that they kind of touched on already in, I believe it was Skyfall. We had, when we first met Moneypenny, she was a 00 agent. And she was working with James Bond on a mission. So I don't think that's a far off idea. And it could be something that definitely worth exploring. I've heard Idris Elba get floated around as a potential replacement for Daniel Craig down the road. And I think that's a really interesting idea. Like I don't know if you ever watched this show, Luther. He plays a very kind of similar character, similar vein. a different concept, but I think I'd buy it, and I think a lot of other people would too. It brings me back to kind of the fan backlash that was around when Daniel Craig was originally cast. I don't know if you remember this or not, but everyone was just incensed that he was a blonde guy.
I remember that.
It was completely ludicrous. I mean, people are going to be, once you see the product though, I mean, Casino Royale is a stellar movie, just a great movie. And really, if you had an equal caliber actor in that role in that movie, as well written, as well directed as it was, man, you got a gold mine there. I think that's really the key with these, is you could put someone in those movies, and if you sold people a good movie and you had a good plot, you had a good story, you had a good actor, whoever they were, I think you'd have the heart of James Bond, and it would carry on.
I completely agree, and it's funny you bring up the fact that Bond fans hated the blonde hair. I was one of them. That it was just, you don't want to break tradition, and that's the I don't want to say problem, but maybe the hurdles that the series has to overcome. Is you have so many diehard fans. There is going to be an outcry of people that say Bond can't be black or Bond can't be this race. And how do you keep your current fans satisfied and continuing to come for more, but continue to be accepting and bring new people into liking James Bond? It's a really difficult task. I think they'll figure it out, but it is not easy whatsoever, because you have the diehard fans that love the tradition of the series, but obviously we can't keep all traditions. Some traditions, like the tradition maybe of from Sean Connery, where he was more physical with the women, somewhat abusive. Like, that's not a tradition we want in James Bond anymore. And some of the other traditions, should come to an end as well, as we become more accepting of everyone in the 21st century.
Yeah, it really is. It really is one of those. It's a special thing. It's like a time capsule to the past. And I think at any era, James Bond, you can just kind of jump right in and see how the late 50s were. And it gives you, it's a really good idea of, maybe not necessarily, I mean, that's not how everyone lived, of course, but it is like to see the cars they drive, to see the attitudes towards things, at any time. Even the 1990s, you jump into the James Bond, Pierce Brosnan years, and you can kind of get a good cross section of what that time period was like. The forward thinking, the forward looking, the really strange villains. I mean, they were like, there wasn't anything really worldwide crazy going on. I mean, there weren't any big wars. I mean, Russia wasn't a big threat. So you had multimedia villains and strange things like that. Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Now that you brought that up, the snapshot potential of it to take a look at an era, I maybe I should go back and watch A View to a Kill again and catch on with the mid 1980s. That was 1980 something, wasn't it? A View to a Kill?
Yes, 1985.
Yeah.
I'd like to get your opinion on the weird James Bond movie, the one that no one talks about, and that's Never Say Never Again.
Okay.
Does that factor into your book at all?
I've mentioned it a couple of times. I forget where I mentioned it, but I do reference it at least once. Hopefully no one takes my idea. But this was another potential book idea that I have for down the line, looking at Never Say Never Again and the Timothy Dalton era, a real niche. This would be a really niche book. I think Never Say Never Again really was revolutionary for its time, where it was a more realistic approach and less over the top cheese with certain aspects. You still had the villain holding the cat, but you didn't have like eye patches and you didn't have the Domino's brother wasn't completely surgically changed. His whole face and body wasn't completely changed. It was just his eyeball. So there was more elements of realism in that, and that was one of my big topics at the beginning of the book, that there's more realism in today's era of Bond than ever before. And never say never again. And on another level, A License to Kill kind of hinted at that. They were more realistic. I don't think the 80s audience was ready yet for that, though, because they weren't popular. But maybe they set the stage for what was to come 20 years later.
I'd have to say that having lived through the 80s, there was nothing realistic about that time period.
Yeah.
It was nuts.
I can imagine.
Ticket stubs. That was the thing.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that we talked about the ticket stubs again, just because that's an interesting idea to me. And I wish I would have saved some ticket stubs over the years, but I haven't. I went back and I looked through after we talked the first time, and I don't have very many. I saved more concert stubs than I did movie stubs.
Okay. Well, saving the concert stubs sounds like a better idea than buying the concert shirts, which I always do for like $35. But yeah, I've got a small collection of ticket stubs. I don't have any current movies. I've gone to a lot of movies this year, but I'm using the AMC A-list pass. Do you guys have AMC theaters in Canada?
There was one. I've been to one in Ontario, but they're not. I think they kind of went the way of the Dodo, which is a shame because it was a really good theater.
Yeah, it is a really nice theater, and I haven't been to any other theaters lately, so I don't know if other places have this, inclusive pass where the AMC pass, you can go to 3 movies a week, and you pay like $23 per month, and you can go to up to 3 movies a week. So you can see like 12 movies a month for $23. So I've been really using that a lot this year, but unfortunately you don't get any movie stubs from that. So I've kept some of them from a while ago, and one of the ones I kept was Die Another Day, the first James Bond film I saw in theaters. I was talking to a friend today about Die Another Day. How he said he really disliked it for all the CGI and the invisible car and how unrealistic it was, and it definitely is. I can't really argue with any of those facts, but to see Die Another Day as an 11-year-old, it was the coolest thing ever. So I definitely had to save that ticket stub.
Probably as an 11-year-old, the uncanny valley is not as much of a problem, I would guess. Right?
Yeah, I would say so.
It didn't bother me. I'm fine with CGI in most cases, but going back to watch it now is a little painful sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had the same. I haven't seen Die Another Day since it came out, and I had kind of the same response. I didn't hate the movie or anything like that. I still liked it, but I was kind of curious as to why you needed to have a computer-generated James Bond surfing down an ice wave. And it was the same response I had at the time to I guess it'd be Batman and Robin, where it was just like way out to lunch, and then you're thinking to yourself, well, this is supposed to be a guy that we believe. That opens up another kind of question that I had in regards to stunts. What are your top Bond stunts? For me, the one that ranks up there is the big parkour scene in, I believe it's, I want to say, is that in Quantum of Solace? Where they have the scene on the crane where they're running, or is that in Casino Royale? No.
That's Casino Royale, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one's up there for me. Do you have one that stands out in your mind?
I think the one I would gravitate towards is the opening scene of The Spy Who Loved Me, where they actually have a stuntman ski off a cliff, and then drop his skis and parachute down into the cliff to safety, and to the theme song, James Bond theme song in the background. And if you watch that scene very closely, I've watched some behind the scenes documentaries of this scene. The ski nearly hits the the stuntman's parachute, and if that happened, the guy was probably going to die. And it was the way I think probably a lot of movies were. It's like, we have one chance to get this shot, and if we don't get it, then we're going to have to rewrite this scene. So for that scene to work, and so close to it not working, and it's a great scene even today to watch. I think that probably be the number one stunt, I would say.
Yeah, the franchise has had so many good stunts. I mean, it's hard to pick one.
Yeah, there have been a lot of good ones.
How about you, Tim?
But that Casino Royale scene that you were talking about, I couldn't have named what movie it was in, but that was pretty cool, the parkour. But I am inspired to go back and watch some of these movies again. And on the second viewing, now that we've had this conversation, I'm sure that I'm going to pull a lot more out of these movies than I did before. I kind of watched most of them on a superficial level, not being as much of a fan.
Mm-hmm.
I think you might have changed that a bit for me.
Well, good. That's part of why I wrote the book. I wanted to share my love for Bond and hopefully spread the popularity of the series, because it's not perfect, and I think I tried to give it a pretty fair and journalistic view of the series, calling it out when it was misogynistic or racist. Throughout my book, I tried to do that, but I still am a fan, and it's something that I hope more people will gravitate towards in the future.
Yeah, it's definitely worth looking at the warts and all, I guess you'd say, of the whole thing, and it is what it is, and it's given us some good moments, and it's given us some questionable ones, and I think it's going to have a lot of good things to say going forward in the future, as we as people might, hopefully, one day.
Well, and hopefully nobody ever gets the idea that any of it needs to be censored. I'd like to think that we'd be allowed to go back and look at what was made in the 1960s with an open mind, and not go, well, that's bad, so we can't watch that. Which I feel like we're on the verge of doing that with some things. If it's not politically correct, they're going to discourage us from being able to find it. So,
yeah, that might be hard to do, but I'm hoping so too. Like there's things in there we talked about last time. One of the things that's really, and 14-year-old me was watching it when I first got into James Bond, and we mentioned the first James Bond movies we'd talked about. This is the Glitch in the Matrix podcast here, ladies and gentlemen, that we're referring to. A black cat just walked by me for the second time this minute. I don't even know what's going on. But the one that I'd watched first was You Only Live Twice. And that's the one where they dress him up as a Japanese man.
Yeah.
And he has to go in undercover in Japan to find the hidden crazy base. And it had some interesting stuff in there. But of course, you have this one moment, and 14-year-old me was going, really? Are you serious? You're doing that? This isn't even sensible. Like, what are you trying to sell me here? But yeah, just a dorky, weird thing, and I don't know what they were thinking, but they did that.
Yeah, they did, yeah. And I that's kind of where I left my book at, and maybe a good place to leave our conversation at is that I don't know whether or not we will be censoring these, early Bond movies or other texts, whether it's a song or a movie or a book that has, an inappropriate scene in it, something that's makes it dated. But for me, I think it's up to the individual. I think it's perfectly fine if you want to say, hey, I don't want to watch this Bond movie because it has this in it, but I'm going to watch, the newer ones. I can enjoy them. I respect that opinion, but I also respect your guys' opinion that you view it as a time capsule, And I guess that's kind of, I've never thought of it that way, but that's kind of the way I view James Bond, the early ones, that there's so many things from the Sean Connery era, the Roger Moore era that I enjoy. It's not that I overlook the bad stuff, but I look at the bad stuff, say, yeah, we don't want that anymore in our society. Let's go back to the part of the movie that I like and we can still enjoy.
Yeah, I think that's a good that is a good place to end it too. You take the you learn from the bad and you move on and you push forward. And I don't know, Bond is a reflection of us, and I'd say if we've left all that stuff behind, we're probably doing all right.
Yeah, like we mentioned in the previous podcast, there again, reminiscing about the non-existent podcast. We also talked about how they shouldn't do the same thing that Marvel did and spread it out into an entire universe, because maybe that would dilute this particular brand.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, there's a, I don't know, maybe a potential for brand fatigue or whatever, but that'd be up to. And maybe Dave would agree, but if there was an audience for it and they told a good story, I think maybe that people would buy into the certain things depending on what it was and not buy into certain other ones. I don't know. It would. What would be your thoughts on that, Dave? Like, do you think that there would be a franchise fatigue, say if they spread into TV and maybe one or two series or did another stream of movies similar to what they did with maybe The Bourne?
I think if they wanted to do a spinoff with a female lead as a TV show or another movie series, I think that's a great idea. As I said, that's kind of a way to satisfy both audiences that want more women or want more to be more forward thinking. It also keeps the tradition that James Bond is a male alive for the diehard fans. I think that's why I like that idea. But this concept of let's have a spin-off series and a prequel of M's life, and let's have a prequel of Moneypenny's life. I don't think that at all is necessary, and I don't think that's anything they would ever consider. That to me is maybe more of a Star Wars idea. And as much as I loved Star Wars, the original trilogy, and I even liked the middle trilogy, at least Episode 3, this new trilogy to me is all a money grab, especially Episode 3.5. And all the spin-off, the prequels they wanted to do, it got to a point where it was fatigue. Solo did not do well at all, and they wanted to make more. They wanted to do a Boba Fett movie and all these other movies, and they just have, I don't know if diluted is the right word, but they've kind of killed the market for Star Wars. And maybe it's good in a way for James Bond that we've had 5 years since the last movie, and I think there's been some people that aren't fans of the series saying, "Oh, Bond, it might be dying because it's taken them so long to get a movie together." Actually, it might be the opposite. They're creating They're creating excitement for the new movie. We only get one now, 2 per decade. It makes the idea of a new one coming out even more enticing. They would completely kill that idea if they come out with spin-offs with Moneypenny is a lead and M is a lead. I don't think they would ever do that, and I'm not proposing they do that. I think the solution, if you want to have a spin-off series, is to just do the female lead and basically have it be the same, just James Bond is a female.
Yeah. Well, there we go. We've come full circle. All right. Well, I think if that's good with you guys, do you guys want to wrap it up?
Sure. Let's talk about where we can find Dave's work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can find His World Never Dies, The Evolution of James Bond on Amazon. One thing I didn't mention last week, guys, is I have some books in my home that I'm more than willing to sign and send to people. If you want a signed copy, contact me on Twitter at DM Holcomb. You can also email me, holcombmdavid@gmail.com if you want a signed copy. And you can send me money, PayPal, Venmo, and then I will mail you your signed paperback. Or you can just get a regular paperback on Amazon, or the Kindle on Amazon as well. And if you're into NFL college football, follow me on Twitter at DM Holcomb.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, I really enjoyed your book, so I highly recommend that everybody listening check it out. And you know what? I might have to give you my address and stuff after this. Maybe a signed copy is something I would like.
That would be great. Thank you so much for having me on, guys, and I would love to send either one of you a signed copy if you'd like.
Oh, thank you very much, Dave. That'd be great. I'll be in touch with you, actually, because I wouldn't mind reading the book on paperback. I'm old school.
I am too. I prefer paperback as well.
And I'd have to say I read it originally on Kindle, and I kind of agree. It seems to me that if you read a book on paper, it sticks in your head a little better. Like I read a lot of books electronically, but then it's a little bit fuzzy. I have to go back again. It's not the same thing. Okay, well, I guess we should call it a wrap.
All right. Well, thanks again, Dave.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks for joining us for the second time.
No problem.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
See ya.
This has been Unreliable Narrator with Ryan Hansen and Tim Ebel. Join us next time when we discover the easiest method to fight off truth decay using cutting-edge mental hygiene products.